Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, I want to share 8 realities of a Christian marriage so that if you're single, dating or engaged, you can be prepared of the reality. You want to be prepared for real life, and that's partly why I create these videos for you. So let's dive right in. So number 1 is you are committed for life. So when you say I do, in your vows, you are saying till death do us part. Now, that is an incredibly big commitment. Biblically speaking, there are only a handful of reasons why divorce is okay. And to be honest, the majority of people who divorce, it usually tends to be about unhappiness or wanting different things or some kind of difference in their marriage that's pulling them apart. And from a biblical perspective, they are not legitimate reasons to get divorced. And so we have to be aware that as Christians, when we say I do, when we commit to marrying our spouse, we are committing to be with them in potentially seasons of unhappiness or seasons where we might want different things. And honestly, the reality of it is that you need to work through those challenges together, that you need to not let life pull you apart, but understand that your differences actually can unite you as a couple to head in the direction that God has for you and your marriage. And so just to be aware that even though many Christians do get divorced, from a biblical perspective, many Christians are getting divorced in a way that isn't always biblically correct. And so you need to be really aware of that and pray into that and make sure that you're committing to someone that you can actually see yourself working through those challenges with, because those challenges will come. The second thing is to take your vows seriously. So, when you get married, there will be certain things that you say at the altar that you will want to commit to and that you will need to commit to. In sickness and in health is a big one for me and my husband. We said that at the altar. My health, honestly, from 10 months into marriage, my health really deteriorated, and I recently had a stent fitted in my heart, in my aorta. And, for my husband, he committed to love me and support me even in sickness. And so he's had to be there for me in a way that has been really challenging for him at times. But because he committed to that vow, he said it, he's really done a brilliant job of sticking to that vow. There's also certain things in the Bible for men and for women that we need to follow. So husbands are called to love their wives like Christ loves the church, sacrificing himself for her. As husbands, you need to stick to that promise, to that biblical principle. For wives, you need to submit to your husbands and take their leadership seriously. These are big things to commit to. Like the first thing I said about, you're committed for life, it's similar. You're committed to these big things for the rest of your life together as long as you're married, and it's a big thing. And so just to be aware of what you're actually committing to. For me, I read our vows about a couple weeks before we got married. I read them like every other day. I also was aware of what the Bible said, and so when I got married, I really did feel in a place where I felt prepared for what I needed to commit to, and that I would hopefully be able to stick to those vows and commitments as the years passed by. The third thing is that you need to put your spouse first. So, this is a biblical principle. We are called to serve one another, to sacrifice for one another. And honestly, this often isn't in huge dramatic ways. I know for me and my husband, it could be who's going to get up and get the coffee and bring it to bed in the morning, or who's going to make tea on an evening when we're both super busy, or when we have children, who's going to pick them up from school when we both have really busy schedules. It's often these little things that can actually build up to bigger things when you don't sacrifice, when you don't serve. It can build up so much resentment. And I would say that as a wife, as a spouse, for me, some of the hardest things to do when it comes to sacrificing is those little things. It's stopping being stubborn and being the one to go and make the cup of tea and bring it to my husband, or letting him pick something that he wants to watch on TV. It's these little things that actually mean a great deal because it shows that you love and that you really care for that other person. So just to be aware, it's often the little things that require sacrifice more than the bigger things in marriage. Number four is there will potentially be pressure to start a family. So in the church, children are seen as a blessing. A lot of Christian couples are encouraged to have children in whatever shape or form that looks like, whether you have your own birth children, whether you adopt, whether you do both, however that looks. And this can be really difficult, especially when you're newly married and you're still figuring out what marriage looks like for you and your spouse. And so, my advice would just be to not listen to the pressure that people are putting on you, or maybe that you're even putting on yourself, and realize that creating a firm foundation before starting a family is so important. Like, I know for me, I got married when I was 29, and there were a lot of other women who were either my age or a lot of women who were younger who'd maybe got married in their early 20s who had multiple children by the time I got married. And that can feel pressure, that can be like, oh gosh, should I be having children now because they are? And actually, the answer to that is probably not. They've been married for a good few years before having children, whereas I've been married 6 months, for example. I think it's important to give yourself that time. And when the time does come, which for me and my husband, we are really wanting to start a family now, it's amazing, and it feels more natural and like it's the right time rather than just doing it because. But being aware that obviously children are a blessing and that it's encouraged to have children and that there's nothing wrong with that. But that if you are not ready, or maybe you may not want to have children, you will need to, in a way, sometimes accept that there will be moments of pressure, but just to take the time and not rush into something too soon. Tip number five is you will need to adjust to living together. So I'm assuming here that as a Christian couple that you didn't live together before marriage and that you're now living together. And that honestly takes a lot of adjustment. It takes time to get used to each other's schedules. Like maybe your husband or your wife is an early riser and you like to have a lie in. Maybe they go to bed super late and you like to go to bed a bit earlier. Maybe their evenings are spent reading or going out for a run, whereas you love to hang out with friends as a couple. You may want different things, you may expect different things when you move in together. And sometimes, honestly, the reality can be quite difficult. I know for me and my husband, what I expected and what he expected when we moved in together were quite different. And it took us probably a good year to actually be on the same page of what our home life and our routines actually looked like. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just being aware that there will be those adjustment period. There will be that time where you need to get used to being together and living together under one roof. And so just to expect that you're not going to move in together and it's going to suddenly click, feel all well and good and perfect, and you've got the same schedules and routines. Chances are it's probably never going to quite feel like that because you're two people with two different lives. Even though your lives are one, you both have different jobs, different friendships, different hobbies, different interests and activities. So don't assume that it's going to be okay immediately. It will take adjustment and time to figure it all out. The next thing, so number six, sex is new and it will take time to learn. Honestly, the amount of time that I laugh at what I thought sex would look like. You know, you see these films, or you watch a TV show or a movie and you see people having intimate relations and you assume, oh, that's what it's going to be like when I get married. And honestly, comparison kills. Never compare your intimate life to anything that you see or anything that you hear. It's unique to you and your spouse, and it will take time to adapt. Honestly, both of you coming home and immediately having sex, or having sex multiple times a day or every day, and sex being super amazing, and like you're really in tune the second you get back from your honeymoon. Honestly, all of those things are probably not reality. To some couples it may feel more natural to get to those stages sooner, but for most couples, it's not really like that. For most couples, you're not having sex every day, or you're not thinking about sex the second you get home from work. And sex isn't this amazing thing where you've got it all figured out the second you get back from your honeymoon. Obviously, it's amazing, but it's probably gonna be a little bit bumpy, and you're still gonna be figuring it out, and I think that's completely normal, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they are wrong. It takes time to figure it out, and honestly, laughing along the way of the little mistakes that you make, or the things that you think are gonna be great that turn out to be a bit embarrassing and a bit awkward, it's all part of the fun of it. It's all part of just having fun together. So embrace those moments, because it's gonna get to a point where you do know more and you have figured it out, and you're gonna look back at those particular weeks, months, and just find it quite comical, to be honest. So don't put pressure on yourself, and just enjoy the process of learning what it looks like to be in an intimate relationship. Number 7 is your values may clash. So, just because your spouse is a fellow Christian and believes in Jesus and has similar principles to you, does not mean that your values are going to 100% line up. Like, I remember dating a Christian guy for a few months, and the previous boyfriend before him was a non Christian. I actually shared the story about all of that on a previous video that I will link below. Um, and so I was really excited about getting with a Christian guy, because I thought, oh, good, we'll be on the same page. He was wanting intimacy before marriage, and I wasn't comfortable with that. And I assumed that as a Christian guy, he would want the same as me as a Christian woman, and that just wasn't true. And in marriage, you may have a lot of similarities and a lot of things may line up, but you may still have different values or different beliefs in certain areas. Like, I was raised in a home and a church that didn't really talk about evolution. I just assumed that all Christians were against evolution or didn't believe in it. And it wasn't really until my 20s, and especially when I met my husband and found out that he believes in it, I was like, "Oh, I'm not 100% sure what I believe, to be honest." And so we still have slightly different views on what creation may have looked like. But we're both on the same page that ultimately what really matters is that, we're here, that God loves us, and that one day when we're in heaven, we may find out the full picture. And we work through those differences. But just be prepared that sometimes you may face different beliefs or values that may clash. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you respect one another and work through it together. And the final thing is, you will potentially feel pressure to have a happy marriage, a picture perfect marriage 24/7. And this is not the case. If your marriage is happy all the time and you never have any conflict or any arguments, chances are one of you, if not both of you, are bottling up a lot of issues that you probably haven't raised with the other person, because conflict, disagreement it's in human nature. It's normal to disagree on certain things, especially when you're living together, and living life together. You will face challenges. Now, one thing I will say is that I'm a real advocate for not airing your dirty laundry in public. And what I mean by this is when me and my husband are having a disagreement about something, I don't want to start having an argument in front of my parents or at church when we have kids, in front of the kids all the time. Like, nor do I want to pretend that my marriage is perfect. I think from this YouTube channel, I make it quite clear that marriage isn't perfect, but I don't want everyone to know all our business. Like, I never share on this channel personal things that me and my husband have gone through because it's personal to us. So because of that, sometimes it's easy to assume that everyone's marriage is great and that you're the only one going through a challenge or facing that particular problem. But chances are that other couple at church or your best friend and their husband or their wife, they are probably going through similar or something different, but equally challenging. And so don't try to pretend that your marriage is perfect all the time. Obviously, be respectful of one another. Arguing and disrespecting the other person in public is not biblical and it's not a good thing to do. But, just be honest and don't expect your marriage to feel like, sunshine and rainbows all the time, because occasionally it will feel that way. But I know for me, honestly, there's a handful of days, most weeks, where I need to process something. Maybe my husband said something that I've taken a bit of offense to, or maybe I've said something that has caused him offense, and I'm not saying that me and my husband are like this all the time, but I would say that every week or two, I need to process something, that's bothered me. Um, and sometimes it's real problems. Sometimes it's me just being a bit silly and a bit petty and taking offense over something stupid. But whatever it is, we're humans and we will face those moments where it's difficult. And so those are some realities of marriage, of a Christian marriage. And I hope the video has helped you understand that marriage is not about it being perfect. And it's not about trying to create a marriage that never has issues or always seems like it's, 100% success all the time. Because marriage is real, it's real life and it's going to have challenges. And sometimes actually being a Christian, committing to the vows, committing to serving to one another, actually can add more challenge sometimes than couples who aren't Christians, who are just living without those pressures or responsibilities. So don't beat yourself up. Be prepared and enjoy the journey. That's what it's all about. Bring God into your marriage, and essentially, if you do that, not essentially, ultimately, if you do that, you will be okay. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you enjoy videos that I do about marriage, let me know and I'll try to create more in the future. So thanks so much for watching. Have a great week. Take care.